It's the middle of winter right now, January 20th. We're going to be starting up a YouTube channel, which I hope to bring longer form content. There's a lot of content on Instagram about plants, and this page is going to be called ONLYplants. We will primarily be speaking about plants all the time, although, everything's connected and plants are the foundation of so many things. So this page is going to be dedicated to plants, but also other things that may be connected to, like wildlife, insects, things like that. So botany in general, I don't have a botany degree, but I have a degree in wildlife biology. And so it's really hard in the United States to get a degree in botany because the botany programs have been defunded, and there's not a lot of programs out there where you can actually get a botany degree. So I had to get a degree in a related field, and then luckily I was introduced to botany early on in my career as a wildlife biologist, and that's what I really fell in love with. I started working with the Native Plant Trust doing rare plant conservation, and then I did habitat restoration for 10 years. So working in New England, doing invasive plant control, setting those jobs up, and killing invasive plants, because invasive plants are second to habitat loss, and they're related to habitat loss, but second to habitat loss in terms of climate change issues and biodiversity loss. So invasive plants were a great thing for me to get involved in initially, because it got me out into the woods and got me into a lot of different habitats in different places, and I got to see a lot of different plants, and so I got to learn a lot about native ecosystems, how they work, and what invasive plants were doing to these ecosystems. So a lot of what this channel is going to be is sharing really cool native plants. In New England, we have 2,500 species or more native plants. Most of them are rare because of what my job is now. Is I work as a rare plant botanist, doing surveys for different types of work that are going to happen, and then I have to create mitigation strategies to try to not impact these plants and preserve them. So that entails seed collection or transplanting sometimes, movement of work, stuff like that. And so the other side projects that exist within my world right now, I previously had a podcast where I would interview people. I haven't done a podcast in a long time. So those are really interesting to listen to. That's the Plants Are People 2 podcast, if you want to check that out. The other things I do are seed sales. So I think it's really important to have local ecotype seeds available for consumers, the public, because they're not readily available. And so if somebody wants to increase biodiversity or restore habitat, it's really hard for them to get local ecotype seeds because there's huge seed suppliers right now, and they're usually not from where you're trying to grow those plants from. So you want those regionally adapted seeds to grow best in your environment to increase biodiversity and be most valuable for insects, wildlife, birds, whatever. So those are just some small side projects I do. And so I guess the first thing we should address in this new channel is, how to get into plants and how to become good at seeing different species of plants out on the landscape wherever you live. Because botany is one of those things. I grew up sort of being obsessed with collecting things, and I can remember I had baseball cards, rocks, zip codes I used to collect. Also those little tags at garment stores, the different colored ones with the different numbers on them. I would just collect every different one of those, and I would eventually get bored with different things. And so what I found with plants is that plants don't run out. There's wherever you go into, if you travel somewhere or you walk into a different hiking trail near your house, there's probably going to be something there that you haven't seen before, because there's so many opportunities to be able to see new things. And so that's always kept me interested. And even within plants, you can drill down into things you haven't seen before on a plant that you're super familiar with, like looking at the seeds under a microscope, researching, what the background, medicinally, what those plants are for. There's so many avenues, different channels you can go down, and, botany can be subsected into so many different things and interests that you could never really get bored, and you can always find something that interests you in it. Plus, plants play such an important role in our lives as humans. Understanding them, acknowledging them, seeing them is really important for conservation and just like baseline knowledge about what our environment's like and potential ways to preserve it, conserve it, and save it for future generations, because we are quickly plummeting towards ecological collapse in a lot of ways. So getting into plants, if you want to do that, if that's something that you're interested in, going out onto a hiking trail, and it's way easier now. When I was in college, we had a book. It was a Gleason and Cronquist book. It was for the whole eastern seaboard, so it wasn't even New England specific. In 2014, Native Plant Trust came out with a flora for New England, which was really helpful. So that just included plants you would see out on the landscape, and it's basically like a dictionary for the woods. So if you can figure out some terminology and put some things together, you can pretty much identify any plant that you would ever run into in the woods. Now there exist these apps, and I'm an avid iNaturalist user, so you can use those apps to help you identify plants, and it becomes really easy when you're out in the woods. And the suggestions sometimes are you have to have a little bit of background to sort of figure it out, but just starting doing that, other people will help you on there, guide you sort of towards the right identification. And then as you get better and better at it, you start deleting the things that you know from the landscape because you've seen them before, and you start looking for the really interesting ones that maybe there's only one plant or a really small population of this thing. In a wetland, for example, you would come across a wetland plant and be like, oh, there's one patch of this, and you wouldn't have noticed that if you didn't notice all the 90% of the other stuff that's there that you've seen before. And there's other books like Newcomb's Wildflower Guide, which is pretty good. It doesn't have any of the rare plants in it because it's really based on the most common stuff, and it's only a couple hundred pages long, so it leaves a lot of things out. So something like the Flora of New England, Flora Nova Anglae, or Go Botany are really useful tools because they're complete. They have all the plants in there. And Go Botany is a little out of date right now, so but it doesn't matter for learning in the beginning. It's just useful to do that. These resources, these floras, they exist for most other places too. And there's some other apps out there called FloraQuest. There's one for the northeastern tier right now. There's one for the Carolinas, which are all really, really good resources created by this guy named Alan Weekly and his team. But they're just basically compiling all the floral keys for different regions into one app, which is really helpful, and you don't need service to do it. So there's those resources, and so the experience of going out into the woods every day, even if it's a place that you've been before and not really hiking to hike, but hiking to see plants, you start to see connections between different plants, habitats, and then as you get better at it, you can almost go into a habitat and predict what you might see. And so that helps you, again, to find those rare plants because you're going to see something that you didn't expect to see there, and then make a connection that way as well. So that's how I learned, more or less, doing invasive plant control a lot. And then getting rid of all the buckthorn and honeysuckle and multiflora rose out of my vision, and then I was seeing all these cool other plants, and so I started finding rare species, and then reporting them to the state, which piqued my interest even more because it just seemed like there was a never-ending source of interesting things to see out on the landscape as long as I could tell the difference. And so that's what I've sort of dedicated the rest of my life and career to is just seeing habitats and seeing plants in different places. And that's what drives me now. So if I go on a vacation somewhere, I want to go somewhere where I can see, plants that are common there that might be rare where I live, because it's going to help me in my job later. Because finding plants using a search image, which is like, you have to see that plant and you imprint it on your mind. And then when you go out in the woods again, whenever you see that, whether it's the leaf, and you get different search images throughout the year. So sometimes you see a plant in flower, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's almost dead, sometimes it's wintertime. So being able to identify those plants in different life stages, those search images also become important, because as you go anywhere to do any sort of work or anything else, like or just interest level wise, you can see those plants on the landscape. And so I'll be bringing you more plant related content as the winter goes on and then into the spring. So we'll have a full growing season of going out into the woods together and seeing a bunch of cool things. So if you have time, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you later. Enjoy the show.